a follow-up to something we've talked about before, prediction markets. We've already walked you through how platforms like Kalshi and Polymarket work. You buy contracts based on whether you think something will happen, covering everything from sports and politics to entertainment, weather, and world events.
I've only lost 50, but I'm up like 1,000 on all the other apps.
Overall, I've probably lost a lot of money, so.
In the past 5 months, I've made around 110 grand.
110 grand, but since we last talked about them, North Carolina has taken a significant step toward recognizing them, while at the same time, the legal fight surrounding these platforms has gotten, well, even messier. Last month, Governor Josh Stein signed the state's new $34 billion budget, and buried inside is language recognizing prediction markets regulated by the Federal Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. That makes North Carolina one of the first states to explicitly recognize the federal government's role in regulating these rapidly growing markets. The state will also collect a 6% tax on the net trading fees operators make from North Carolina users. That will officially start at the beginning of next year, 2027. Now, that's different than traditional sports betting. Let me walk you through this. Sports books are licensed and regulated by the state. Prediction markets are being recognized as federally regulated markets, while North Carolina taxes the business that they do here. So the state has effectively taken a position in a much bigger national fight over who gets to regulate all these things. It comes as other states are actually going in the opposite direction. New York and New Mexico have sued Kalshi, arguing some of its markets amount to illegal gambling. Kentucky has sued both Kalshi and Polymarket.
The clash that is occurring right now is between this federal regulator, the CFTC, and the states. If the federal regulator is in fact the correct regulator for these prediction markets, then the states are preempted from being able to regulate them and can't ban them.
And that right there is the heart of the fight here. The CFTC says these federally regulated markets fall under its authority. But some states argue putting money on an uncertain outcome is gambling, and state laws should actually apply here. Prediction markets argue they're different from traditional sports books. In fact, they go far beyond that. We took a look for ourselves on the app Kalshi to see what contracts users are trading, and we found some of these questions right here. When will traffic through the Strait of Hormuz return to normal? Who will be Time's Person of the Year? And will Sony announce the PlayStation 6 this year? Those percentages move as people buy and sell, reflecting what traders collectively think is more or less likely to happen.
And the primary difference is you're not betting against the house, right? These are swaps. It's actually trades between, one person taking one position, one taking another position, and then the platform makes its money off of the fees associated with being able to use the platform.
Hope you're keeping up here. So what about South Carolina? That's where things are much less clear here. Traditional sports betting remains illegal, and unlike North Carolina, South Carolina has not passed a law specifically recognizing federally regulated prediction markets. But it hasn't explicitly banned them either. So people can still access these apps and buy contracts in South Carolina, even though traditional sports betting remains illegal there. That leaves the state facing the same question. Are these federally regulated markets, or is this gambling that states have the authority to regulate? South Carolina's next attorney general could help determine the answer to that. That office is up for grabs in November.
And so as one example, whoever is selected as attorney general is going to have to decide, are we going to push back against federal law on prediction markets, or will these be allowed in South Carolina?
And South Carolina isn't alone in wrestling with that very question. The CFTC has gone to court itself, arguing states cannot shut down markets that are already federally regulated. So right now, there's no single approach across the country. North Carolina is recognizing and taxing prediction markets, but other states are challenging some of those same markets as illegal gambling. And until courts decide who ultimately has the authority to regulate them, where you live could determine how they are treated.